So, just look around the room you're sitting in right now. Like, really look at it.
Yeah, the chair you're sitting on, the screen, you're looking at all of it.
Exactly. The paint on the walls, even. Roughly 90% of everything around you is brought to you by a commercial truck driver.
Yep.
But the person who actually hauled that freight, they likely spent, I don't know, 2 hours today desperately driving around just trying to find a legal paved rectangle to park their truck so they could get some sleep.
It's a massive issue.
Right. And then, right as they finally pull onto this dark, unsafe highway off-ramp and turn off the engine, they check their phone and discover that a massive new federal regulation was just passed.
By people they've never even met.
Exactly. A rule that dictates their insurance rates, their daily schedule, their entire livelihood.
Yeah, it is a brutal reality for millions of people moving freight across the continent. I mean, we have this romanticized image of the open road, right?
The ultimate symbol of American freedom.
Right, you get a truck, you hit the highway, you are your own boss. But the absolute truth is that the open road is, well, heavily paved with bureaucracy. It's actually one of the most strictly regulated work environments on the planet.
Which is exactly why we're taking this deep dive today. We are looking at a highly revealing report. It's called Shaping the Road: Power and Politics in Trucking Associations.
It's a really fascinating document.
It really is, and our mission here is to uncover the hidden forces that actually write the rules of the road. Because, look, whether you manage a fleet of 1,000 trucks or you're just a regular person buying a gallon of milk and driving your sedan next to a massive 18-wheeler, these decisions impact you.
Absolutely.
They dictate the price of your groceries and the safety of your morning commute. And almost all of it is negotiated behind closed doors by organizations most of us have never even heard of.
That's the crazy part.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even start with a system that regulates billions of tons of freight?
Well, we start by looking at the sheer scale of the rule book. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the trucking industry doesn't just operate under, a few basic traffic laws.
Right, it's not just speed limits.
Far from it. A driver is dealing with thousands of overlapping federal, state, and provincial regulations.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking about strict emissions standards, incredibly complex labor policies, minute-by-minute safety rules, and insurance mandates that can literally make or break a business.
So the trucking associations, they essentially exist so that the people actually doing the work have a seat at the table when those regulations are drafted.
Exactly. They are the ones defining the rules of the game before a single truck even leaves a loading dock.
Because without them, lawmakers in Washington, D.C. or Ottawa, who have probably never even sat in the cab of a semi-truck, would just be making these sweeping laws in a total vacuum.
Right, which would be disastrous.
Yeah. So to understand how the rules are made, we have to meet the rule makers. And the report breaks this down into this massive clash of perspectives. It's essentially the giants versus the independents.
Yeah, the landscape is fundamentally defined by that dynamic.
Yeah.
And representing the giants, you have the American Trucking Associations, the ATA.
Okay.
They were the largest trucking trade association in the United States and really the undisputed primary voice on Capitol Hill for the big carriers.
And when you say carriers, you mean the companies that actually own the fleets and employ the drivers.
Correct. The ATA represents these massive logistical operations, state trucking associations, major industry suppliers.
Got it.
When they walk into a congressional hearing, their platform is very macro level. They are pushing for vast highway infrastructure investments, nationwide supply chain efficiency, workforce development to solve driver shortages, and broad safety mandates.
So they're looking at the whole board.
Yeah, they look at the industry from 30,000 feet up. They focus on the overall profitability and flow of freight across the entire country.
Reading their priorities in the report, it really sounds like the ATA is basically the corporate lobby of the highway. Is that fair?
Well, they definitely push for the kind of massive sweeping efficiencies that a multi-million-dollar logistics corporation wants.
But what does that mean for the guy who just owns, like, one single truck?
See, that is the core of the criticism against them. And the report is very objective about this tension. Critics argue that because the ATA's membership is dominated by these major, well-capitalized carriers, their policies naturally favor those large fleets.
Right.
And here's how that works mechanically. If the ATA successfully lobbies for a mandatory new safety technology, say, a complex digital tracking system or a new collision avoidance radar, a corporation with 10,000 trucks can just buy that technology in bulk.
And they probably have a whole department for that.
Exactly. A dedicated compliance department, They handle the paperwork. They amortize the cost, and it just becomes a tax write-off.
Right, but for an independent operator,
For an independent operator with one single truck, that same sweeping regulation is a sudden $15,000 expense. It could literally bankrupt them.
oh wow. So a policy designed to make the whole highway safer can inadvertently crush the small business owner,
Yes.
which perfectly explains why the other major player exists. If the ATA is the voice of the macroeconomy, the OID is the fiercely defensive voice of the microeconomy.
Right, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association.
Founded in 1973, and they represent over 150,000 members.
Which is huge.
It is. These are the independent contractors, the small 3-truck fleets, the men and women who, pay for their own diesel and find their own freight. But here's my question. If the ATA is actively pushing for highway safety, why is OOIDA constantly fighting them? Don't they both want safe roads?
Well, they do, but they violently disagree on how to achieve it without destroying livelihoods. OOIDA's mission is really about micro-survival. They provide highly individualized support that a small business needs just to exist. Things like regulatory guidance, group insurance programs, licensing support, legal assistance.
So they're like a safety net.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a new owner-operator trying to navigate the federal code, OOIDA is their shield. They fight the ATA because they believe that massive corporations often use the banner of quote-unquote safety to push for heavy regulations.
Ah, I see.
Regulations that conveniently act as a barrier to entry, essentially squeezing the smaller competitors out of the market entirely.
Man, it is such a fascinating dynamic. You have the massive corporate fleets pushing for standardization and the independent operators just fighting for operational survival.
Yes.
But neither the giant fleet nor the independent driver makes any money unless they actually have freight to put in the trailer.
Very true.
Which brings us to the financial ecosystem sitting right between the trucker and the goods. The middlemen.
The logistics brokers.
Yeah.
And this introduces another group, the TIA, the Transportation Intermediaries Association. They represent the freight brokers and third-party logistics providers, often called 3PLs.
Let's break down what a 3PL actually does functionally, because I think a lot of people just assume a farm calls a trucker to move their apples.
Oh, it rarely works that way anymore.
Oh, no.
No. If a massive paper mill needs to move 50 loads of cardboard across the country, they do not have the time to call 50 individual truckers.
That makes sense.
So they hire a broker. The broker goes to a digital load board, posts the job, finds the independent truckers or fleets, negotiates the rate, and then takes a percentage of the transaction for making the match.
So they're the connectors.
Brokers are the vital connective tissue of the supply chain, and the TIA's job is to establish ethical business practices, educate those brokers, and currently, their absolute biggest mandate is preventing a massive wave of freight fraud.
Yeah, the report mentions freight fraud is exploding, but how are people defrauding a system that deals with, 50-foot physical trucks?
Mostly through digital identity theft and something called double brokering.
Double brokering.
Yeah, a scammer will digitally pose as a legitimate trucking company, accept a load from a real broker for, say, $3,000. But the scammer doesn't actually have a truck.
Right, they're just on a computer somewhere.
Exactly. They then turn around, pose as a broker themselves, and hire a real trucker to haul the load for $2,000.
Oh.
The real trucker delivers the goods. The scammer pockets the entire $3,000 from the original broker and just vanishes.
And the actual driver who burned their diesel and time gets absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
That is devastating.
Yeah.
So the TIA is trying to lock down the security of these transactions.
Yes, they are.
But while they're fighting scammers, they're also locked in this massive regulatory battle with OOIDA over something called the FMCSA Broker Transparency Rule.
Yeah, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration transparency debate is arguably the most intense financial fight in the industry right now.
It sounds heated.
It is. Under current federal regulations, the law states that any party involved in a brokered freight transaction has the right to review the financial records of that transaction.
Meaning the trucker is legally allowed to see exactly what the shipper paid the broker?
Technically, yes.
Let me guess, there is a loophole.
A massive one. Brokers frequently include strict waiver clauses in their contracts. In order for the trucker to get the job, they have to sign the waiver, which effectively surrenders their legal right to see the transaction data.
And OID wants to ban those waivers.
Yes.
And honestly, looking at the mechanics of this, it makes total sense. Here's where it gets really interesting with. Think about it like a real estate transaction. Imagine buying a house, but a waiver legally prevents you from seeing how much of your money is going to the real estate agent's commission. You just get a final bill. If I'm the driver doing the heavy lifting, literally paying for the maintenance, risking my life in a blizzard, why shouldn't I know how much of the pie the middleman is keeping? If the shipper paid $4,000 and the broker is only giving me $2,000, keeping a 50% cut just for sending an email, I need that visibility so I can negotiate a fair rate.
That is the exact crux of the argument from the drivers. Transparency creates a free and fair market. But let's look at the broker's reality, which the TIA fiercely defends.
Okay, let's hear it.
Brokers argue that mandating total transparency forces them to reveal highly proprietary business data. If a broker has spent 10 years building a relationship with a major shipper to secure slightly better rates, well, that margin is their competitive advantage.
Sure.
They argue that revealing it to every single independent contractor they hire breaches customer confidentiality and exposes their entire business model. Plus, the administrative burden of opening their books for every single load
that would be a nightmare.
would be catastrophic for a fast-moving brokerage.
It's an absolute tug of war. The driver wants to see the math to avoid being exploited, and the broker wants to protect the proprietary margins that keep their business alive.
Exactly.
And the federal regulators are just sitting right in the middle trying to figure out who gets to see their receipt. But let's step away from the digital load boards and the financial contracts for a second, because eventually the truck physically has to move.
Right.
And frequently that freight is crossing an international border.
Which introduces a crucial player that often goes unnoticed in U.S.-centric discussions, the Canadian Trucking Alliance, or the CTA.
Right, the National Trucking Federation of Canada.
Yeah, and their role is vital because the North American supply chain is deeply physically integrated.
The CTA handles policies around cross-border transportation, commercial vehicle standards, driver recruitment, because, if an automotive plant in Michigan needs parts manufactured in Ontario, those parts are coming on a truck.
Exactly. If freight does not flow smoothly across that specific border, both economies just stall out. The CTA works to harmonize the regulations so a truck doesn't get sidelined by conflicting compliance rules the moment it crosses the bridge.
But the report highlights something truly remarkable here. When you look at the physical realities of driving, whether you are an independent OOIDA driver from Texas, a massive ATA fleet driver out of Ohio, or a CTA carrier out of Toronto, they are all united by one absolute system-wide crisis.
Truck parking.
Truck parking.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It sounds so incredibly basic. It doesn't sound like a policy issue. It sounds like an architectural oversight. But the lack of a safe place to park is a terrifying daily reality.
What's fascinating here is that something as simple as a paved rectangle to sleep on has become a major federal lobbying issue. It heavily impacts the safety of everyday drivers sharing the road. To understand why it's a crisis, we have to explain the mechanics of the Hours of Service Regulations, or HOS. Federal law dictates that a commercial driver has a strict 14-hour daily window in which they're allowed to work.
Okay, 14 hours.
And within that window, they are legally only permitted to drive for a maximum of 11 hours. Once that clock runs out, they must stop for 10 consecutive hours of rest, period.
And they can't fudge that math anymore. The days of writing down fake times in a paper logbook are over, right?
Completely over. Because of the ELD mandate, electronic logging devices, these are digital time clocks hardwired directly into the truck's engine. When the truck moves, the computer logs it. The driver has zero ability to stop the clock.
So imagine the scenario. You're driving a fully loaded truck. Your digital engine clock says you have exactly 15 minutes of legal drive time left. You pull into a rest stop, and every single one of the 80 parking spots is full.
Yep.
What do? You are trapped. If you keep driving to the next town to find a spot, you violate federal law, an alarm goes off, and your license is at risk.
Or, if you pull over onto the dark shoulder of the highway, you risk being hit by a drunk driver in the middle of the night, or being targeted by cargo thieves.
It's an impossible choice.
It creates unbearable daily stress, which destroys driver retention. And it severely degrades supply chain efficiency, because drivers will literally stop driving at 3 in the afternoon, wasting 2 hours of legal drive time just to secure a parking spot at a truck stop before it fills up at dusk.
Wow.
Every hour a truck is sitting idle when it could be moving costs the economy money. That is why ATA, OOIDA, and the CTA are arm in arm, aggressively demanding federal infrastructure grants to build more parking.
It perfectly illustrates how a lack of physical concrete actively undermines millions of dollars of federal safety technology,
Exactly.
which is a perfect segue into how lawmakers are currently rewriting the rulebook for the driver's daily reality. Let's look at the major legislative shifts coming down the pipeline, starting with Delilah's Law.
Right? Slated for implementation around 2026. Delilah's Law is one of the most comprehensive overhauls to the commercial driver's license, or CDL, process in decades. Its entire focus is on standardizing driver quality.
But why does it need standardizing? I assume getting a license to drive an 80,000-pound missile is already pretty rigorous.
You would hope so. But historically, the system has had massive loopholes. Because testing is administered at the state level, some states have been criticized for running what amount to CDL mills facilities with notoriously lax testing standards where underqualified drivers can quickly get a license.
And once they have that state CDL, they're legally allowed to drive interstate routes anywhere in the country.
Exactly. So Delilah's Law aggressively closes those state-by-state loopholes. It mandates strict universal oversight for driving schools and rigorously enforces English language proficiency verification, ensuring every driver can actually read federal highway signs and communicate with way station officers.
And what really stands out in the report is that nobody is fighting this. Delilah's Law has incredibly rare universal consensus.
Yeah, everybody supports it.
The big fleets, the independents, the state associations, they all want the bad actors off the road because an unqualified driver is a liability to everyone. But while training regulations bring everyone together, the technological oversight tears them apart. Let's circle back to that ELD mandate we just talked about.
The engine-connected tracking device.
Right.
The electronic logging device mandate is the perfect distillation of the industry's divide over technology. The federal government mandated these devices to replace traditional paper logbooks. The ATA and the major fleets fully support ELDs. From their perspective, a digital log is clean, standardized data. It heavily reduces administrative paperwork for the back office, and crucially, it prevents driver coercion.
Meaning a ruthless dispatcher can't call an exhausted driver and say, I don't care if you've been driving for 12 hours, fix your paper logbook and get this load to Chicago.
Exactly. The ELD prevents that because the engine data doesn't lie. On paper, it is a brilliant safety mechanism, but OOIDA and the independent operators fiercely challenge it. They argue that a digital tracker doesn't magically make a driver safer. What it actually does is strip the driver of their professional discretion. Under a paper log, if a driver hit a massive unexpected traffic jam or felt incredibly fatigued at noon, they could pull over, rest, and adjust their hours within reason to ensure they only drove when they were truly alert.
Oh, I see.
But with an ELD, the 14-hour clock is ticking relentlessly no matter what.
It forces them to race the clock. If you know your engine is going to turn you into a federal criminal in exactly 3 hours, you are going to push through bad weather, skip meals, and drive stress just to beat the buzzer. It replaces common sense with a rigid algorithm.
And that algorithm feeds directly into another massive regulatory mechanism. The report covers the FMCSA's overhaul of the CSA scores. That stands for compliance, safety, accountability.
Explain how these scores actually work, because this sounds like a terrifying report card for adults.
It essentially is. The FMCSA maintains a digital safety profile for every motor carrier. Whenever a truck goes through a weigh station or gets pulled over, any violation, a worn tire, a broken taillight, or an hours of service violation caught on the ELD, is assigned a point value and logged into their CSA score.
Okay.
The FMCSA recently overhauled this system, renaming the categories to compliance groups and heavily weighting recent violations, particularly zeroing in on maintenance and driving hours.
And if your score gets too high.
The consequences are catastrophic. A high CSA score triggers federal audits. But even before the government steps in, the free market punishes you. Freight brokers will refuse to give you loads because you're a liability. And most importantly, your commercial insurance premiums will absolutely skyrocket.
Wow.
For a small fleet, a few minor violations resulting in a doubled insurance premium is a death sentence. It will literally force them into bankruptcy.
So every time the ATA or OEI argue with federal regulators over how many points a broken taillight should be worth in a compliance group, they are literally fighting over the financial survival of their members.
Absolutely.
But there is an even bigger, more existential fight on the horizon: the transition to electric trucks.
Ah, yes, the push for zero-emission vehicles and heavy-duty truck electrification. This is a great looming battle. Environmental agencies are aggressively pushing timelines to phase out diesel engines.
Look, everyone wants cleaner air. Nobody wants to breathe diesel exhaust. But when you look at the mechanics of electrifying a Class 8 semi-truck, the math gets incredibly concerning. Who actually pays for this?
Well, the transition costs are generating massive anxiety across every single trucking association. It's not just the sticker shock of a commercial electric truck, which can cost 2 to 3 times as much as a traditional diesel tractor. It is the infrastructure.
Right.
An electric heavy-duty truck requires an immense amount of power to charge. There are profound, well-documented concerns about whether the national electrical grid can even handle thousands of trucks plugging in simultaneously at a highway rest stop.
Not to mention the weight issue. An electric battery capable of moving a fully loaded semi-truck is incredibly heavy. And because trucks are legally capped at 80,000 pounds on the highway, if your battery weighs 10,000 pounds more than a diesel engine,
That's 10,000 pounds of freight you are no longer legally allowed to put in the trailer.
which means you need more trucks on the road to move the exact same amount of groceries.
It's an incredibly complex engineering and logistical puzzle that lawmakers are trying to solve with legislative mandates, while the trucking associations are desperately trying to inject the physical realities of the supply chain into the conversation.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from the daily horror of finding a parking spot to the multi-billion-dollar debate over the national electrical grid.
It means we have to recognize that trucking associations do far more than just hold annual banquets. They serve 3 critical functions. They advocate for their members' survival against crippling legislation. They educate their members on how to actually comply with these massive regulatory shifts. And they promote the vital necessity of the industry to a public that largely takes it for granted. They really are the invisible engineers of the modern economy.
Yeah, whether you're managing a massive fleet out of Atlanta, driving a single rig across the Canadian border, brokering loads in a digital office, or just a regular person picking up a package from your front porch, the decisions fought over by the ATA, OOIDA, TIA, and the CTA directly shape your reality.
They absolutely do.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, specifically building on that anxiety over electric trucks we just talked about. If the green revolution demands massive, overwhelming upfront capital, hundreds of thousands of dollars for new EV trucks and private charging depots, could these zero-emission mandates inadvertently do what decades of regulations haven't? Could the sheer cost of going green be the ultimate barrier to entry, squeezing out the small, independent owner-operators that OOIDA fights to protect, and leaving only the giant corporate fleets of the ATA to inherit the future of trucking?
It's a huge question.
It really is. Think about that the next time you see an independent driver, exhausted after a grueling day, just trying to find a safe place to park. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking at the forces behind the scenes, and we will catch you next time.